Welcome to another episode of Behind the Scenes, a weekly program unveiling the biggest political developments in Somali politics. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host here on Wararka Media. On this week's program, Behind the Scenes will be assessing the decade-long relationship between the brotherly nations of Somalia and Turkey. How much has Turkey benefited from strong relations with the federal government, both in Somalia and Africa as a whole? And is Somalia becoming Turkey's gateway into the continent of Africa? These are the topics on the program this evening. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to Wararka Media. Let's get straight into it. Now, despite the title stating 10 years on, the relationship between the Somalis and the Turks go back centuries, from the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Adal, which simultaneously fought in a war as allies against the European and Ethiopian influence in East Africa, as well as the Indian Ocean. Now, fast forward a few centuries, Turkey re-established relations with Mogadishu following independence in 1960, with relations remaining until 1991 and the collapse of the central government. Turning back to the modern era, it was just 3 weeks ago that Somalia and Turkey celebrated 10 years of renewed relations between the two nations. It was a decade ago when the Prime Minister of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, became the first non-African leader to visit Somalia since the visit of US President George Bush in 1993. This was during a period in which East Africa was suffering its worst drought in 60 years, with over 3.7 million people that were facing food insecurities in Somalia alone. A delegation headed by Erdogan included the Turkish cabinet and family members of officials. The images circulating across the media was a significant milestone and moment in Somalia's roadmap to reconstruction and re-establishment on the world stage. A high-profile visit broke the decades-long misconception that Mogadishu was a no-go zone, an image which directly hindered Somalia's status on the international stage and essentially cemented Somalia's status as a failed country. The visit placed Somalia in a glimmer of international spotlight, which has only continued to grow in the past decade since the visit. Indeed, for decades since the civil war began, Somalia has suffered neglect and dismissal by the international community, with many countries and peoples completely ignoring the many issues that were facing Somalis in that country. Conversely, the Turkish public raised $115 million for Somalia during the blessed month of Ramadan in 2011, the peak of the famine. Similarly, the Turkish government announced the rebuilding of the road to Mogadishu airport, the restoration of hospitals, building of schools, as well as the drilling of water wells. The relationship between the nations and the peoples of Somalia and Turkey has only continued to grow and develop into a now multifaceted and multi-layered partnership, including military arrangements, social, economic, and infrastructural cooperation. A look back at Turkey's role in Somalia in the last decade includes, in 2012, Turkey contributed over $201 million to the humanitarian relief efforts in Somalia. In March 2012, Turkish Airlines became the first major commercial carrier to fly directly to and from Aden at the airport since 1991. In May 2013, the first Turkish-Somali business forum was launched in Istanbul to highlight the investment opportunities in Somalia. In September 2013, Turkish company Favore LLC began operations at Mogadishu Airport. The $10 million project increased the airport's capacity from 15 aircraft to 60 aircraft. In October 2013, the Somali cabinet endorsed an agreement signed between the Ministry of Ports of Somalia and the Turkish firm Al Bayrak to manage the port of Mogadishu for a 20-year period. Now, this agreement, which Wararka Media heavily criticized on our program, Dulmar. Here's what the Minister of Ports, Mariana Weiss, had to say about the agreement.
maxaad ka saxdeen dhinaca saami qaybsiga waxa tikada ay ka helayso Soomaalidu iyo waxa shirkadan Turkidu qaadanayso dabcan waxay marka hore kala ahaayeen marka loo eego boqolkiiba imisa iyo boqolkiiba imisa haatanna ay joogtaan
marka hore waxay ahayd 55% ee dawladda Soomaaliya inay qaadanaysay 45% shirkadda inay qaadanaysay laakiin isbedelka aan heshiiska ku sameeyay micnaheeda ma ahayn saami qaybsiga kaliya ma ahayn meelo badan aan ka fiirinaynay sababtoo ah dekadu waxay u baahnayd horumar dhinac walba kaliya lagama fiirinaynay dakhliga soo galay laakiin dekadii in la bilaariyo qalabka maxalida ay ku shaqeyso la hagaajiyo tiknoolijiyada cusub adduunka isticmaala naftirkeeda dekada inay yeelato waxyaabahaas qayb ayay ka ahaayeen teeda kale shaqaalaha ka shaqeynaya dekada nabadgelyadooda iyo waxyaabahaas oo dhan ayay maxalida heshiiska ka koobneed oo laga hadlayo marka isbeddelka aan samaynay runtii saami qaybsiga isbeddel weyn aan samaynay oo kor loogu kiciyay dowladda boqolkiiba 60 wax ka badan ayaa maanta dowladda ay ku leedahay qaybta soo hartana shirkadda
Continuing on, in January 2015, Turkey finished the construction of Erdogan Hospital in honor of the Turkish president and the role Turkey has played in Somalia's road to recovery. In fact, Turkey pledged $86.5 million of the $135.7 million budget of the hospital to be paid for until the end of 2020. In September 2017, Turkcom was formally inaugurated with an expected 10,000 Somali soldiers to be trained both in Turkey and Somalia. Now, indeed, as many of you probably are aware, these include commandos that have played a significant role in the fight against Al-Shabaab this year, such as Gorgor commandos, police commandos such as Haramad, and also new officers being trained for the Somali National Army that will lead the future of the Somali military establishment. Despite the long list of support demonstrated by Turkey, it is factually incorrect to assume that Somalia has been receiving only handouts from the Turkish government. Turkey benefits financially from its ventures in Somalia. For instance, the Turkish company Al-Bayrak gains financially from administrating the port of Mogadishu. Similarly, many Turkish companies have gained from being prioritized contracts by the Somali federal government. In terms of constructing buildings, all these things are financial assets being gained by Turkish companies in Somalia, directly as a result of positive relations between Turkey and the Somali government. Additionally, Turkey has acknowledged the significant advancements made by Somalia despite 30 years of war. For example, Somalia has one of the best telecommunication systems in Africa, with companies such as Hormuz and Somtal leading the market. Additionally, Somalis have business ventures all over Africa, with various businesses in many countries across the continent. For Turkey, that is another advantage to be utilized to expand its influence across East Africa and beyond. Lastly, positive relations between Somalia and Turkey has seen many Somali businesses and investments propping up across major Turkish cities, which has benefited the local Turkish economies. Irrespective now, the large-scale investment made by Turkey in Somalia highlights two important points for the Turkish leadership. Somalia and much of Africa, with the right investment, has the potential to grow exponentially, including huge returns. Secondly, Africa, including Somalia, can become the largest market for Turkish manufacturers and products. The reality is that the economic powerhouses of the world are all competing for one thing: consumers. The hierarchical nature of the international stage is drawn from this very principle, which is underpinned by the capitalist model which governs world economics. Now, it's quite obvious that American and Chinese companies sell the most worldwide products. For instance, US corporations dominate a multitude of world markets, such as technology. Companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Apple, these are the companies that run that market, and in turn make America a financially very wealthy country. Now, a developing country, a growing country like Turkey, with various private companies producing large quantities of products annually, for that country to benefit financially, it requires a market to sell such products. There is where Africa and Somalia come into play for Turkey. Now, if Somalia, which is a recovering nation from 30 years of civil war, is returning such large financial returns for Turkey, the realization of investment in Africa as a whole can only be imagined. Nations are already competing in Africa. The recent indirect tensions between France and Turkey in West Africa demonstrate just that. The competition for political and economic influence in Africa is currently the biggest battlefield on the world stage. We see the US, we see the EU, we see China, all competing at the moment for influence across the continent. And we've seen that literal triangular tension being played out in Somali politics as of late during the election period, as is what is going on in the UN Security Council between China and Russia and the United States and UK and France and those countries. The leadership in Somalia must utilize this new spotlight and value attached with the country to provide the financial and political means to re-establish Somalia, not just in regional politics, but on the world stage. Nevertheless, Somalia has seen many enemies as of late. The pressure from international partners has only continued to grow, particularly since the presidency of Mohamed Farmajo. His administration has relied heavily on Turkey to rebuild the Somali National Army, something that has instilled fear and worry amongst nations that perceive a strong Somalia as a threat to their vested interests or simply their stability. The resurgence of any nation is underpinned by the re-establishment of a security sector, particularly the armed forces, that is able to sustain the security of its own people, of its own institutions, and of its own borders. Now, Horfeda Media can confirm that Villa Somalia received various questions and conditions regarding the Somali National Army, including why the SNA is exceeding 18,000 soldiers and why Somalia continues to have increasing closer relations with the Turkish armed forces. Many Western countries perceive Turkey's role in Somalia as a direct threat to vested interests in Mogadishu. Turkey has the biggest military base in Africa within Somalia. It has also spread its wings across various strategic socio-economic positions in the country, strengthening its influence in Somalia and limiting or weakening the influence of many other nations that have vested interests in Somalia or want vested interests in Somalia, whether that concerns its natural resources or its simple strategic position in the Gulf of Aden. The reality is that for these countries, the easiest policy in dealing with the threatening relationship is to attack the weakest of the two, the Somali government. Now, this can be done in various means, including the refusal to remove the arms embargo at the United Nations, support and continued funding for Amazon forces, and a lack of support for the Somali National Army, challenging one person, one vote model, and actually supporting a quite shambolic indirect elections, and supporting regional states against the central government. In fact, Horofredde Media can confirm that the Somali government had intended to sign new agreements with Turkey regarding handing over security of its coast, while simultaneously allowing Turkish navies to train the Somali Navy, including up to 10,000 new recruits. Now, this was outright challenged, rejected, and hindered by some major countries. And for such countries, Turkey and Somalia's continued intermixing, amalgamation, and eventual unification of its security sectors is a major threat to their policies within Somalia. Now, one has to remember Somalia's strategic position at the door of the Red Sea having one of the most important and strategic routes of trade in the world, coupled with Somalia's outlandishly long seacoast, which is currently the longest seacoast in Africa. The reality is that Somalia is currently at an important crossroad, and what Somalia needs more than ever is an ally. And strategic alliances are critical to the backbone of any foreign policy that underpins a nation standing at the world stage. For example, take a look at Israel and the United States. The importance of alliance between those two nations ensures Israeli security, ensures Israeli stability, and also ensures Israeli influence in the Middle East and also on the world stage. Now, for Somalia to continue its development, for Somalia to be able to stand on its 2 feet, for Somalia to be able to defend itself on the world stage, it needs to develop a stronger and closer foreign relations with Turkey. It needs to strengthen and maintain its key alliance with Turkey. And that is the only way for Somalia to gain more influence, to gain more spotlight on the international stage, and for Somalia to be able to defend itself on the international stage.